Ladies and gentlemen, we are live once again with Ashton Forbes, one of our most viewed interviews in the last year. That's fantastic. I just went to check. We're over 10,000 on almost everything we've ever done.
Wow, that's awesome, Diamond. I'm happy to be here, man. And happy to be here with your audience again. I've always loved talking to you. We would talk several times about the MH370 stuff and the updates related to that. I think your audience really enjoyed it because they're really knowledgeable about the history of suppressed technology. So I think tonight's going to be a good one as well.
And it's hard to find a popular podcaster that has scientific knowledge to bring the conversation somewhere. Most people are laymen and they're just like, tell me about aliens.
All right, so go ahead. I was just going to say, like, the aliens thing, too. It's like, isn't that so weird how the UFO community is just so obsessed with aliens? Like, I need another whistleblower to tell me how many times they've seen or talked telepathic with aliens, which I'm not hating on it, guys, but it's just like, to me, isn't it more exciting that, like, we could get in a spaceship and warp ourselves to Mars and be there in like 3 seconds or instantly, or, have technology where we could have hover cars or, having a completely electric civilization. Just those are the things that excite me personally.
Wouldn't you rather to live in fear of the secret Nazi base in Antarctica and the secret Mars program with the blue chickens?
Yeah, well, when the great mantid wars come, I'm going to be on the side of the mantids. I just want to make sure that is on the record.
Well, interestingly enough, Rex Bear, a friend of mine who lives in town, Leak Project, and myself both have mantid experiences in our youth.
Nice.
Mantids were watching over me at my doorway when I was like between 1 and 5 years old. I can remember in my crib. I can remember them. They never came in the room. It was never scary. They were just looking at me from the doorway. And like, I could remember they were having like some kind of intimate discussion about what was going on.
Yeah, see, I think they're misunderstood. They're not as angry and scary looking or as scary as they look. So that's why I'm on their side.
Why I got you on the show today is to talk about a few new topics in your wheelhouse. First, you're famous and your Twitter has blown up. The last time you were on, you had 47 or 44,000. Now you're at 124,000 followers, 5X. And that's just a few months. That's amazing. And your YouTube is now almost at 30K. So I think tonight we can get that up to 30K in an instant because people know your name now. So first, do we have any updates on the MH370X project at all?
So the biggest update is we've been waiting for AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, to respond back. Now, I had pretty frequent communication every few weeks with them.
Is this like FOIA?
No, this was like I submitted the case with the videos and the leaker, Edward C. Lynn, to the AARO. I said, here's verifiable evidence. Like, I'm not necessarily a firsthand whistleblower, but I found these videos on the internet and I've done more research on them than I think, most people have done for anomalous videos that are out there. And I said, this is all verifiable information. You can confirm if that's a MQ-1C or some other variant of a drone filming MH370. And if we have some secret spy satellite capabilities that show video that can, record after the fact, like we see in the MH370 videos. And then I gave them the name of Edward C. Lynn, which I said, hey, look, I dug around and I found this guy who I'm like 99.99% sure he's the guy that leaked the videos. So his case is super weird. They never said what it was so damaging that he released to the public, which is pretty unusual for an espionage case, certainly one where they had no evidence that the person was actually a spy. So I gave them all that information. I said, go find out what the deal is. They assured me that they could, and they seemed kind of like carefree about the situation, like there was no chance they would find anything. And this was back in January. It's June right now. And every couple months, every few weeks, they would send me another reply saying, we'll get you back your memorandum of record. And I sent them some questions saying, I found some more weird stuff. Can you answer these questions? Well, like, this looks pretty authentic. And they said, we'll answer those questions next week. And then nothing again. And finally, on April 11th, they came back and they said, hello, Mr. Forbes. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. Initial investigation into MH370 has found something about the U.S.'s search efforts after the plane was lost from radar, which was supposedly at 1822 UTC, like 20 minutes before these videos happened. And they said, can you tell us more about where the Regicide Anon video comes from? And they said a brief call might be helpful. And that was 2 months ago. And I sent back since then like 4 emails where we found even more stuff about like how the military uses this software mixed with Google Earth to track objects, just like we see in the satellite video. We found the capabilities of the camera, this like, I think it's called the Westcam MX25 or something like that, where there's a video online and it looks just like how the drone's tracking the video. So we found all this stuff and just said, you know, waiting
So
for
you've
some
done
kind
a
of,
lot of corroboration on all the videos over the last year, and from the satellites they're coming from. For the listeners that you just, the earlier information you spit out there, there is a dude that is locked up for espionage, and you think there's a link between MH370 and the leak of this, the 4 orbs. The leak of the videos is from this guy.
Yeah, let me clarify, because they actually had no evidence that he was a spy, so they couldn't charge him with espionage. The government was terrified of it actually going to court because they thought if it went to trial, they would have to show the evidence that he leaked, which is like, what would they be afraid of in a court? Well, you can imagine if those videos are real, then that's what they're going to be afraid of. And so they ended up giving him a plea deal, making him like get convinced that what he did was really bad. And he got 9 years. They shaved 3 years off. So he got out couple of years ago, and since then he hasn't reached out to me, even though I've been saying his name on like every podcast. AARO could have looked into it. I think the reason why they didn't respond,
that as part of the plea deal, he can't ever discuss this.
Oh, exactly. And so I think that honestly, my true opinion is that the AARO found out that this is what he leaked, and now they're just panicked. I think we might have red pilled some random AARO guy as well who didn't even know about this kind of technology. And then he got directions from above say, don't respond to that guy anymore.
Well, it's interesting is that time takes time. So as these revelations come to light, things may develop.
And so anyway, it's interesting because I think that if that stuff had been fake, they should have been able to come out right away and say something. And now they might be in a trapped situation. A lot of people as well were saying AARO will just lie to you, and I was expecting them to lie, but they came back with this weird, paragraph back to me a couple months ago, which indicated they found something, and now we're in this weird limbo stage where they won't respond. So in the meantime, people say, well, what are you doing with MH370? We've investigated almost everything there is. One of the most recent updates we found was that one of the orbs actually cuts through the smoke in the back of the plane, and you can see accurate fluid dynamics.
I saw that last week, bro, and that was like, whoa.
Yeah, a lot of people had the same reaction and started reaching out to me. They're like, whoa, what is up with this? Because, I mean, how do you fake that? Like, that's especially because we have 2 videos in perfect synchronization, and like we have this incredible detail that we found. And people say, well, why did you just now find it? Because Quantica Science started doing color change versions of the videos. And so I posted one of them, which I thought looked really cool. And then somebody points out, like, hey, you can see the smoke getting disturbed by that orb when it passes through it. And then we went back and looked at the original, and you can see it in the original. It's just very faint. And I went,
it's
wow.
Right before the instant it disappears.
It's like after all 3 orbs get around it, like one of the orbs clearly cuts right through the smoke. Like if there was a smoke, like a big thing of fog, and you were to run through it, and the smoke and the fog would like go past you. It looks just like that. Super wild. So that's the biggest updates that we've had out there.
What's interesting is that they would have never calculated, because these orbs don't care if there's smoke or whatever's there. They're just doing their thing. And just so happened that this one orb at this moment before it disappears cuts through the smoke, and it literally, I think, is the nail in the coffin that these videos are 100% true.
Yeah, and I mean, so you can imagine this: the orbs are spinning around like in a sphere. So you wouldn't like it just happens that one of them happens to cut through the smoke. Like they could have all theoretically missed it, but this one cuts through it. And yeah, I believe those videos are 100% real. Mostly also because I've looked into the case, and there's definitely a conspiracy going on with this plane. They don't just disappear. But then the science, which we're going to dig into now, I dug into the science, and I'm 100% convinced we've got gravity manipulation technology. We've got free energy, all this stuff in black projects. And I think it's been suppressed for actually decades. That we were talking right before we went live. Like Thomas Bearden is on videos in 1985 talking about cold explosions and basically explaining teleportation exactly as we're seeing it in the MH370 videos. To me, that was like the nail in the coffin for, oh, wow, it's really out there. And I started using some of my back channels, some of these people I've been in contact with and done interviews with. And they're like, oh, yeah, Thomas Bearden's a legend, in the black world and in the like government engineering world. So I've been digging into more and more. And absolutely, there's just a ton of corroborating evidence going to people like Ning Lee, Bob Baker. All these people were looking into high frequency gravitational waves. And it's just, that's what's led me to the point now where I'm talking about free energy, because I realize that the core, or like the fundamental layer of all this, is this idea of Overunity, of free energy is possible. And that's what I was hoping we were able to get to talk about here today.
Yeah. So what we're going to dive into this, and the topic of the entire show is not what we just talked about. That's just an update on what's been going on with Ashton. We're going to be talking about the suppression of technology in academia and in general in society. And it's for a purpose. Now, what I know about the government in the United States, and which is the first superpower, remember, in the modern world. So once we became the first superpower in this modern technological world, we're now reaching ahead, right? And the head is where some global governance type thing. And what is the reason for that? Well, I think it has to do with a shift in technology in the 1940s and 50s, which brought up the SCI, which eventually became the special police in the United States, which became the CIA, which then devolved into the FBI and all the crap we have today. These agencies were developed to suppress technological discoveries that were being made since the 1940s. And it has continued till today. And it's so obvious in the test of the internal combustion engine, developed 125 years ago or more. And then the steam engine developed in the 1700s. Think about it. We've had these type of combustion engines that move on pistons now for 300 years. The technology has not changed. Yet in the last 50 years, we went from a dial phone to a literal supercomputer you can hold in the palm of your hands. Something is amiss between those two technologies right before your very eyes.
Yeah, I think that's the scariest part for me when I dug into this, is that all of this was new to me. The conspiracy stuff, the UFO stuff, gravity tech, what have you. And when I started digging into the history of the science, I found out that it goes back decades, much further than I thought. It may go all the way back to like the Philadelphia experiment, it may go back before then, like the 40s, like you were saying. And that's the thing that kind of blew me away and started to scare me, because it's like, wow, how have they been hiding this for so long? And what's the landscape for how it's been getting advanced, or like the timeline for how it's been getting advanced? I like to think that it would start with like radar dishes and the ability to like shoot electromagnetic waves upward, and then evolve to satellite dishes that could shoot downward. They now have a much bigger field of view where they can see, to the point where we see in the MH370 videos, like literally floating orbs that are producing these types of effects that are out there. And from there, that's where I figured as well, this idea of free energy, which is being able to produce more energy out in your system than what you're getting into it. And also this idea that you need an ether, a space-time ether, which is that there is an unlimited source of energy that we can tap into, like an ocean of energy that's out there. And if that's possible, then we can produce Overunity through a non-equilibrium system, through a negative entropy system, which is one where instead of losing energy due to heat in our system, we can put more energy into our system from the outside, which conventional physics would say is impossible. But if we open our system up, then it does become possible.
Well, let's jump to the potential beginning of this technology. Let's say the Philadelphia experiment is the time frame for the big shift. What's the date of the Philadelphia experiment?
1943, the USS Eldridge, also known as Project Rainbow.
Right. So they figured out this technology. It's a year after a UFO crash, supposedly in New Mexico. Can you believe that?
Yeah,
So,
the timing is pretty convenient, right, with some of this stuff. And it turns out,
right.
like the Philadelphia experiment, you've got Thomas Townsend Brown tied to it, Einstein's tied to it, even Tesla supposedly didn't want any part of it as well. You got some big heavy hitters that were tied to this project. And the idea was they were supposed to cloak this object, cloak this boat. And there's a direct connection between this idea of like bending all the electromagnetic waves around an object and teleportation, or bending space time, I guess is a better way to think of it, because space and time are connected. So if you bend space, you're also bending time as well.
Right. And it was the infancy of this technology, and it went very poorly.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that you try something the first time experimentally, you know, and it gets scary. There's these 3 DIA papers, Defense Intelligence Agency papers. They're called the DIRDs, and 2 of them talk about warp drives, manipulation of extra dimensions, and negative energy. Another one talks about wormholes, stargates, and dark energy as well. And they talk about this idea that like if you were to wormholes are humanly traversable, but if you were to like touch the edges of one, that it would go really bad for you. And you could imagine if you've got these powerful electromagnetic fields around the ship and they weren't aligned correctly and they're like cutting through the ship, things could go really poorly for the people that are in the wrong spots.
Yeah. And so what's interesting to me, if we follow this technology glut through the decades following the Philadelphia experiment, we end up with Bob Lazar in the 1980s that says that this technology exists. He saw it in the hangar, and we still, 40 years later, don't really know how to use it that well. We barely can use it to fly around with, and they don't understand the technology.
Yeah, and the Bob Lazar thing's interesting. I don't know, you know, how on the money he is in general, but I do think that he comes across as a genuine guy. I think that if we have crafts and we've been working on it, absolutely, it's been going back to the '90s or well before that. It's really just a matter of like how long has it taken us to figure it out, and how long has it taken us to advance it.
Right. And if we think of it as legitimate, and there's no reason to discount Bob Lazar's account, that by the 2000s, we would have perfected this technology.
Yeah, I think the 2000s is kind of what I've been marking in terms of like when it really would have taken off, especially this idea of quantum computers and advanced computers. Like you could see how those could really help the technology take off. And the reason why I think that is I look at the MH370 videos with the satellite video, you see the orbs spinning around the plane, and you can tell right away there's no people or aliens inside those orbs. It's clearly either some kind of homing mechanism or computer targeting or computer programming there as well. And that's where too you can imagine the calculations required in order to make sure your singularity is the exact right size from the physics equations. They say that the 2 factors are the force, so the force of whatever the electric orbs are, and then how quickly they converge, which is the time element. That would determine how big your singularity is going to be.
Well, they claim the singularity is not going to happen for another 6 years, but that has to do with knowledge and technology, where AI will know everything or something like that. But we're talking about a different singularity.
Yeah, and my singularity I'm talking about is more like a wormhole, like a rip in space-time. And this is where the idea of the ether comes into play, which is the underlying like empty space without anything there. It's not just nothing. It's space is not empty. It's this idea that the space-time ether has this ocean of negative energy, which is simply energy that hasn't been pulled into our active environment that we live in every day. And this is the idea that if you rip away the paint away from, say, your painting, then what do you get to? You get to the canvas. What is the canvas? The canvas is can be like a shortcut between any 2 points in space and time. And maybe light is not limited to the speed limit of it that we think it is. Perhaps that's just the medium that we're in right now, and that's the reason why the speed of light is the speed that it is. And perhaps if we pull away from that, now the speed of light can become potentially even infinite, where now you can imagine that any 2 points in space and time are connected.
Well, I think that where I'm at now, and let's get real esoteric here, is that time. Ashton just left the program. He's coming back. I can see his shadow in his Pokemon cards there. Here he comes.
Sorry about that. We're back.
Yeah, what I was getting to is that I think that time is only exists when there are biological entities involved. Biological entities can only exist in time, and there are other realms in our universe where time is irrelevant. And so for the human or biological entities like us to comprehend that we could rip open the fabric in a place where there's no time and move things instantaneously from one spot to the other is unimaginable. But it's because we are polluted by the fact that we are engulfed in this construct called time.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that space and time being connected means that, and because time dilation is a thing, that when you bend space, you're bending time. And then the concept is, well, is time even linear? And does time even exist, or is it just an illusion? And I happen to think that both of those things are, let's say I happen to think that time is not linear, as that think of it more like a circle. And I also think that if you were to look down on it from a higher dimension, it would look like it's not moving at all, which would give this idea that time is just an illusion in general. Like, because of our biological bodies, that's how we're made to experience it. And that's how I think that when I've looked into the science, it's made me more spiritual from that perspective, because then you, I think, naturally come to the conclusion that the universe is a construct, and that if so, then there must be a creator, and it makes you wonder about the existence of a higher power, things like
Yes.
that.
So biological construct only exists through respiration. There needs to be in and out, whatever the respiration in the creature is. Humans breathe air. Other, plants breathe carbon dioxide and exhale air. We breathe air and exhale carbon dioxide. So there's all this type of respiration happening in time. Time and respiration, I think, are directly linked. And I've been on high dose mushroom and DMT trips, and the entities that are in those other dimensions do not breathe, and they do not like the fact that we respirate.
Yeah, I would say, if you want to get more scientific too, is like, what even is gravity? If you look at, I post this video every so often about how to understand gravity. And really, gravity is curvature over time, where objects are moving in straight lines, but when you have curvature, they're just bending together. So what's the factor that's causing them to bend together? That's time. And so what looks like falling to us, if I were to drop this rubber band, it looks like it's falling, but what's happening is, over time, both the earth and the rubber band are coming together. The rubber band's just coming together quicker than the earth is, because the earth is much bigger than the rubber band is. And then that opens the door to this idea that the scalar potential in Maxwell's equations is the stress in the medium. And I like to use this equation, or this example here, because when Oliver Heaviside came in and reduced Maxwell's equations from 16 or something down to, I think, 4 that are the common ones that people know, we lost this scalar potential. And so now Oliver Heaviside's equations, the analogy would say that in physics, if I pull on this rubber band equally on both sides, it's not moving left or right, because both sides are pulling equally. If I pulled twice as hard, still both sides are equal, so it's not moving left or right. 5 times or 10 times as hard, still, once again. But does that mean that there's nothing going on? No, there's a stress in this medium. Now I can flick it like this and you can hear a noise. And if I were to pull super hard, this rubber band's going to snap, which that's the stress in the medium. That's the scalar potential in the medium of the rubber band. So what is the scalar potential in the medium of space-time? Gravity. Gravity is the scalar potential. Like, if I were to take this shirt as space-time and I pull on it, you're going to see that there's going to be there's going to be this stretchiness that happens on it. That's the same idea of what's happening in space-time as well. And this goes to show how space and time are connected. This is what time dilation is that the closer you are to a big body of mass, the, let's say, slower your time goes compared to somebody who's further away. So somebody on the Earth is going to experience time slower than somebody who's out in outer space, meaning that if we look out there, it's going to look like they're moving faster than they really are. If they're looking down at us, it's going to look like we're moving slower than we really are. And this is how the world or the universe kind of self-corrects. This is how space-time self-corrects. Now, then the question is, well, how do we manipulate that? So if we can then produce a gravitational wave, we can produce this stretchiness, then theoretically we can make an object that can just produce stretchiness in front of itself and then allow itself to float around like a roller coaster, along its own geodesic. And that's exactly what we're seeing also in the MH370 videos. And I've now read multiple papers that basically confirm to me that we've been working on this technology since, at minimum, early 2000s, maybe even before that.
Yeah. So in layman's,
papers,
in layman's terms, the faster you can distort space-time in front of you and then and rush towards it, then the speed that you can achieve becomes unlimited.
Yeah, and there's
and
also
in that bubble, there's going to be zero inertia.
Yes.
There's going to be no G-force. Nothing is going to be happening. You are going to be
because you're pulling the space-time around you.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like being on a conveyor belt. You're not moving. The conveyor belt's moving.
It's exactly how Bob Lazar explained the reactor 40 years ago.
And here's the crazy part about all this is that all this suppressed technology, all the technology that's been hidden from us, is all connected by these same concepts. And this is why they have to hide all of it. This is why they can't let one piece of it out. Because any piece of it that gets out, now people look at the underlying framework for how it's possible, and then they go, oh, wow, that means we can also produce infinite energy as well, over Unity, and we can also produce weird, like, I wouldn't say weird, but let's say almost magical types of healing properties. Some of the other stuff we were looking at from high frequency gravitational waves, which blew my mind, is like telescopes that might be able to have resolution capabilities, magnitudes more powerful than what we have right now.
Right, and anti-gravitics, so you could move massive blocks of stone.
Yeah, communication capabilities that can allow us to be unbreakable in terms of encryption.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because you're moving in your own space. You're moving in your own space-time tube that no one can access.
Yeah, and faster than light communication can be possible.
Yeah.
I think there's a connection between cold fusion as well, where you could trap a plasma into a confined area and cause it to basically have a miniature sun. And I think that there's a connection between anything that can produce over Unity, which is coefficient of performance greater than 1, meaning you're getting more energy out than what you're locally putting in to produce.
So what I've seen on over Unity experiments, they put 12 volts in, they get 15 or 16 out.
Yeah, and so that the coefficient there is like 1.2 to 1.4 or so, because you just divide one by the other.
Yeah.
But I think, and I've been told that you can get coefficients of performance that are in like the single digits. So
because I think that the device I saw was too small, and if you scaled it up, you'd get better coefficients.
Yeah, it's possible.
We're using an oscillator,
and there's different ways to produce it, I think. Now, what I will say as well right now is that I have found an entity that I was so convinced by talking to them for a while that I was willing to sign an NDA if they told me how it worked, and I did do that. And we actually started a business together. Is this Enerod? Sorry, what?
Is it Enerod?
No. So I started a business called Ethertech. I haven't revealed who the entity is that has produced the device, but they're in a rare situation where they've actually produced over 30 of these devices already and sold them behind the scenes. I wouldn't say the black market, but you get what I'm saying. Like people who are well off or connected, that know the right people, that know this type of technology is possible. And so they've already had the manufacturing process in place, and they are somewhat altruistic, not fully altruistic. We're not giving it away for free. I mean, it costs a lot of money to produce these devices, but starting to bring it to a bigger platform, bring it to a bigger audience, so that it's not just rich elite people that are able to purchase these devices. And there's been some pushback because a lot of people think, well, you should just open source it. But I would say to those people, I have a really good lay of the land from all this suppressed technology that I've looked into. And this is not the first time that an over Unity device has been invented, let's say, and they always get suppressed. So a lot of people, some people have tried to open source them. Some people have gone other various routes. None of them have been successful to date. I think we can all agree upon that, at least not to get to the widespread audience. So we're trying something a little bit different, which is somewhere in the middle, which is that we're not going to open source it. We are not going to just put it on CNN. We're not going to have a million YouTubers put it on their channels or whatever, because what would happen is that everyone's going to debunk it, and they're going to come up with these illogical arguments, and we're going to have to try to knock down all these silly arguments that people come up with how it can't work, as opposed to just it does work. People can buy it because it does work, and then when it gets to enough people, then maybe we open it up to something like that where it's more mainstream academic peer review. Because I've seen last year, especially with stuff like LK99, the way it worked out, that was an open source. They said, just here, mix copper and lead, and you'll be able to produce this product that can be a superconductive room temperature metamaterial. And then what happens? Everybody goes and produces it, and most, if not all of them, fail to produce the recipe correctly, and they claim it's debunked and it can't work. But we also have videos of the people that produced it correctly showing Meissner effect and flux pinning. So who am I supposed to believe? The people that didn't produce it correctly, or the people that did? This is how suppression, where the government doesn't even have to get involved. Like, we hurt ourselves so much because so few people even understand science. Even these people that are YouTube debunkers, stuff like that, even they have a tenuous understanding of science in general. And they're more so just about trying to get the clicks and stuff like that.
Dude,
so this is the reason we've gone this route.
About the state of science.
It's a bad spit right now, especially with like,
Cosmologists have been baffled for 3 decades. Every time we make a better telescope, they don't understand a single thing about the universe. And they're so stodgy, they won't simply adopt plasma universe or EU, which is the truth. Everything is explainable using those models. And we're just stuck. It takes decades. We're going to be dead before we actually have a cosmology that works.
yeah. And
And
let me add on to some of that real quick,
go ahead.
because the thing you said about the telescopes, I mean, James Webb Space Telescope, we used to think like just a year ago that the universe was 13.7 billion years old. And then James Webb Space Telescope goes into the sky. And now we're like, well, we're seeing galaxies that are way too advanced, that are super far away. So now it's like 26 billion years old. I'm sorry, what? We're adding 13 billion years to the age of the universe, like overnight. Obviously, we don't understand something. You know, and then there's also those other aspects where people say, well, Ashton, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know the laws of thermodynamics. Guys, I do actually. Now I've studied them a lot. So when it comes to the laws
I got a
of thermodynamics,
4.0 in thermodynamics in graduate school, and I answered my final essay in French fries because he wanted it in kilocalories, and I gave it in French fries. It was like 4.8 times 10 to the 26th French fries. And he was like, and then he told the whole class that I was the only one right, and the answer was in French fries. And I'm looking out at the class, and they're like, what is he talking about? This is thermodynamics. Yeah, each French fry from McDonald's, there is an assigned kilocalorie. I think it's 15 kilocalories per fry. And I just divided it to give him the answer. And because I thought he'd think it's funny, because my professor was awesome. That is science. But the science we're doing today is based on political control. The political bottleneck happened around 1990 when the National Science Foundation was turned over to the federal government. So the NSF is now government owned. Most scientific industries in other countries in the EU and worldwide are scientifically driven. And that leads to agenda-driven products that are not science whatsoever.
yeah. And so what I'll say is with this product, it's already been produced. People have already bought it. And
I
don't
like
hold
it.
me to this, but what I was told that I can say is that this product can potentially produce coefficient of performance of 2 or greater, which is people would think completely impossible. So that means you're getting twice as much energy out as it takes to run the device. This one is electromechanical. It does have moving parts on this particular device. I think there are other ones that can be produced that don't have moving parts. Dr. Greer talks about one from like the Holcomb generator. I think that doesn't, but the other thing I liked about this is it's probably more comparable to the price of a car or expensive solar panels relative to some of these other more complex designs that are probably in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to produce. And then with respect to the science, the first law of thermodynamics is you cannot create or destroy energy. Well, once you realize that there's an ether now that has unlimited negative energy in it, and that's where the virtual particles come from and the quantum fluctuations in the vacuum, which we know exist because of the Casimir force and the Casimir effect. Now you can understand that if you open your system up to that, just same way where wind plants open their system up to the wind, then now you can actually get more energy in. Then it's not that we're creating energy, we're borrowing it. We're borrowing it from a lake, an ocean of energy where we're just taking little teaspoons out. That's not even going to affect it. And the second law of thermodynamics would say that you can't create a system that is perfectly efficient. But in this system, again, if we open our system up now to this ether that's out there, now we can potentially have negative entropy, which is this idea that we're actually pulling energy in from this outside system. We're adding it to the energy that we're taking in, and then combining that on the output, and it's getting more that's out there.
I've seen these Overunity systems in operation. You simply take energy in. Let's say you're connected to the grid at your house.
Yep.
You pull the grid into the Overunity. It goes through the system. It runs through a few very specific types of capacitors that build the energy up. And then it runs through what appears to be multiple Tesla coils or oscillation coils that just simply moves the energy into the free air. But these coils also are within the ether so that they're either adding energy through, as the energy moves through the coil, it must pick up more ions from the atmosphere and bring it into the system. Is that how it's working?
It probably depends on the type, and I can't speak exactly to how the one that I've seen and was told works. But what I can say is Thomas Bearden does do a really good video on the one that he came up with, which is called the Meg, and it has to do with creating using a specific material and then creating a specific shape. A lot of times it's like a toroidal type shape, but the idea is to trap the magnetic field in some way. And this, in the way he does it, I think he traps it within the medium of the material he uses, and that this produces excess energy. And then the question is, well, how do you trap that energy? And the way he describes it is you need somebody who's an engineer who can create the right resonance where you can actually trap that energy. And that energy is the excess energy that's theoretically coming from the ether. So that, yes, you have some energy coming in that you're producing from the grid or wherever else. Then you have other energy that's coming in from the design of your device. And then there's some efficiency coefficient. So if it's only 90% efficient, then you lose 10% of that power. You can then have let's say then you have 2.0 coefficient, then you pull back 1.0 of that power back into your system. And then now your systems become self-sufficient. So you can just unplug it. So you would unplug it in to get it going, unplug it, and it just sits there producing energy perpetually. That's the kind of device we're talking about here. And this does seem amazing.
So does the Overunity device you're talking about, once you kick it on, you can unplug it and just work on the ether?
Yep. And you can plug it in, get it going, unplug it, and then you're just good to go.
That it was only going to be like a 40% energy reduction in a bill or something.
No, and so here's the thing. Then the only question of your energy reduction is the size of your device. And that's where the price points come into play.
Right. So if you need to have the right build out for when you unplug.
Yeah. And then, not even that, but all of them can theoretically be unplugged because they're all Overunity no matter the size. It's more of a matter of how much energy are you using. So in your house, the things that probably use the most energy would be your refrigerator, your air conditioning system, stuff like your dryer. Those are using a huge amount of energy relative to everything. Like light bulbs, lamps use almost nothing. Your computer actually doesn't even use that much.
All on, you're talking 4,000 kilowatts per hour.
Yeah. And so on average, the average American home uses roughly 25 to 30 kilowatts per day, I believe. And from talking to my partner, the entity I signed the NDA with, a device of that size, and it's somewhat variable, is going to cost somewhere between $40,000 to $50,000 with the configuration that they've designed, which seems like a lot. But if you look at like solar panels and stuff, those cost tens of thousands themselves. So the idea would be if we can get this to a point where we can start to bring those costs down through economies of scale, through more efficient processes, cheaper materials, then we can get to a part where this product gets cheap enough where like anybody can buy it. And that's what I want to do, because I want to try to help change the world. So right away, the plan that I helped devise, because I'm a business major, that's actually where my classical training comes into play, is an alpha rollout stage. So I've already gotten probably almost 100 emails, and I haven't sifted through them yet, of people who are interested. And we are vetting those people to get it down to probably 10 or 12 people that are, have the disposable income. I don't want to like take money from people that, can't afford it or whatever, but also people that believe in the product. We can show them and give them proof if they're willing to sign an NDA related to it. And then people that are going to be quiet about it, because we don't want people blasting this on YouTube or on CNN or whatever else. I think that this technology that's this impactful, you have to give it the respect that it deserves. And we do want to get it out there, but we don't want to just break the system, because otherwise the government's going to come knocking and shut it down, I think. So we have to be a little bit careful about that. And people will say, well, you're being paranoid or whatever, or other people will say they're going to take you out. We're skirting the line here one way or another with respect to this. So if people are interested that are watching right now, the email address that I set up for this is aethertechLLC@gmail.com. That's aethertechLLC@gmail.com. Ethertech is the name of the company that we set up. And we, once again, we are vetting it to just a small number of people that we think we can trust based on looking.
That means most of you won't get it.
I mean, right away. But if it works out, guys, and I think
you're all going to fucking get it, because I'll buy it.
Then eventually everybody's going to get it. And eventually, too, I've already talked about different ways. People are already excited about different ways they can make money off of this product, like mining Bitcoin or growing marijuana were two of my
Duh.
favorites that I heard, because the lights related to growing marijuana and the power needs for the GPUs for mining Bitcoin, stuff like that. And right away, I would say that the biggest benefit
What
is
about
not
all the off-grid havens that are coming up, camping units, campsites, anything off-grid? You could go literally into anywhere, set up your Overunity, and boom, you have infrastructure to set up a network.
Yeah, so the biggest benefits right off the bat, I would say the biggest benefit right off the bat is not the cost savings, although you would save money over time, even with something at that price point, because your electric bill is going to go down a lot, but it may not go to zero. It depends on how much you use. But the bigger benefits are energy independence from the government, because the government basically controls all the energy companies. The other one is being able to go off the grid, like you just mentioned. If you have a situation where you're in a disaster zone where, like, the power grid goes out or the power goes out, now you still have power and nobody else does. And then the idea, if you're somebody who likes real green energy, and I'm not talking about bullshit green energy like wind and solar, I'm talking like real green energy that doesn't actually have any negative byproducts, because these devices are pretty small as well. Even the bigger ones are only like 3 by 3 feet, and their height is only like, I think, about a foot tall or so. So
Wait. You mean I don't need 13 acres of toxic
solar
panels?
panels, yeah, that have to be replaced every like 10 years
Well,
or
every
something like that.
hailstorm.
Every hailstorm, like it's actually wild how much of a scam the green energy stuff is that's out there. And if we've been able to do this for as long as I think we've been able to do this, it shocks me, and it makes me wonder if, like, the only reason we've been able to even get this far with this business and stuff, and then what I've been pushing out there is, like, maybe there are some people on the inside that do want it to kind of finally change,
Yeah. And I think so, because you're not dead yet. So let's
That's
end
what I keep
this
thinking.
section on Overunity. I believe
Yeah.
you're going to be overwhelmed by the response to Overunity and the new project, because this is not the only type of free energy machine that's out there. We were just discussing before we started the show about Malcolm Bendel and the plasmoid reactor. Let's talk about Alpha Prospects and Durlite. Do you know who they are?
Those names don't ring any bells, but maybe if I see what you're referring to, it will. But
This
I'm going
is
to meet
for-
Malcolm Bendel actually this weekend. I'm going to be at the Cosmic Summit. Quick shout out to that. If you're interested, I am going to be giving away some passes for the online passes. I think they're sold out in person already, but going to meet Malcolm Bendel, Bob Greenyer, who does low energy nuclear reactions.
Well, can
as
you
well as
get
some
me
other
there in
people.
person? I'll drive.
I think it's sold out at the moment, but I can ask.
I know it is. But there's too many people I don't like there, and I would cause too many problems. Trust me. Yes.
That's funny.
So this is the Alpha Prospects and Durlite presents. Can you see this? Is it up?
Yep.
Let me go look.
No, we can see.
Let's shrink our asses down so we get bigger picture here. And so I shared this about 2 years ago when I found it on the internet. It's for internal combustion engines using water as an atomic fuel. This is proprietary and confidential. My live stream got shut down because this was patented at the time, but it's since been, I think, weakened, because I think Malcolm wants to get this information out there, and we're going to show you the device. Let's let it come in. Yeah.
And this is the same kind of idea too, real quick, is that, like, what we're trying to do is, like, we may open this stuff up later on, but, like, people like Malcolm too are smart about the suppression. So right away, you keep it as proprietary, and then when you feel comfortable pushing it to the world, then that's when you push it out there. And I can already see the vortex generator right there that I'm familiar with.
Yeah. Well, it's totally cool, because this all has to do with support from Electric Universe, Plasma Universe, and this is all coming from the big explosion starting at 2010, because in 2008, a plasma physicist met up with some crazy people at EU, and they came up with this. Well, they basically proved this Saturn model. Do you know the Saturn model?
Not off the top of my head, but I'm actually starting to become more of I think that the plasma universe is what I wouldn't call it the electric universe. I think the plasma universe is what I think makes the most sense, because we can't explain dark energy and dark matter. And that's where I think the ether and the plasma model come into play and really help us understand.
Right. So if you adopt the plasma universe model, there is no need for dark energy or dark matter, but there can't be black holes.
Yeah. And that's the question where,
be
like,
a big bang.
Yeah, and I don't think that I'm actually moving away from the idea of a Big Bang. And with respect to black
But
holes,
there
I think,
can be wormholes.
yeah,
There can be space-time shifts, because we know if the universe is infinite, then gravity is a local effect.
yeah.
So
Did you see?
space-time is local in these what do we call them? Galaxies.
Did you see the most recent image of the black hole? I think it was Sagittarius A star. It looks a lot like a magnet vortex. It's pretty interesting
Well,
to see.
Sagittarius A and B, they
Mhm.
they compose like 7 or 8 plasmoids that look like bar magnets that are
Yeah,
vertical. They
yeah,
call them like the ancients, and they hover there in the middle.
interesting.
It's yeah, and the more advanced our telescopes get, the better. I mean, it literally, when we saw the center of our galaxy
Hmm.
using James Webb, it literally, people were stunned because
Yep.
it wasn't what they said was there.
Wait, I was everything's impossible and unknowable until we find out, and when it becomes possible, we know it. It's
Just like you
pretty
said
wild.
earlier, then we
Yeah,
looked to the edge of the universe and we were like, wait a minute, it's twice as
yeah,
far.
exactly.
That was 2 years
Pretty
ago.
wild.
And
Pretty wild.
so, and still not a single mainstream outlet in the mainstream media has published that the universe is 26 million years old or
Billion, yeah.
26 billion years old. They still sit with that 14.8 billion year old number. And people continue to repeat the 14.8 billion
Yep.
nonsense when we've already seen a galaxy 26 or so billion years away that was already developed, which means that it took time to develop.
Yeah, and this is where I would tell people too, is this is why, like, a lot of people think that, oh, well, academia and scientific papers are how science progresses. That's not how it really progresses. That's how it actually gets suppressed, I would argue, is that the science is what you're seeing. If you want to see science on the cutting edge, then you need to be on with your ear to the ground on social media, listening to the scientists that are doing the research on, at hand. People like Bob Greenyer, Malcolm Bendel has been doing his own research. This is where we find the cutting edge stuff. And what I want to say right away with respect to the thunderstorm generator is, even if this doesn't produce Overunity, which, the question here is, are the plasmoids producing like a form of cold fusion in that image we see up there? We're not sure yet. The verdict's still out on it, I think, from my most recent conversations with Bob Greenyer. But even if it doesn't, when it's hooked up to the engine, I think that it's pretty much conclusive that it's actually basically reducing the emissions to zero, essentially fundamentally zero, like 99% reduction,
Yeah.
huge
So
reductions.
whatever is happening in the thunderstorm generator
Mhm.
is literally recycling the exhaust
Yep.
100% and transmuting it to oxygen.
It's pretty wild because what you're seeing there in those vortexes, one of them is water pumping one direction, and the other one's the CO2 or the carbon monoxide and dioxide, the exhaust, the other direction. And then this creates this vortex plasma type effect. And then it pumps the excess oxygen that from, I guess, the transmutation, the alchemy, back into the engine, which actually increases the efficiency of the engine as well. And that's why the people that know about this are so excited. Plus, he's done it now open source, and in order to produce this, it's like stuff that like you can buy at the local pet store. And then all
Yeah.
you need is somebody who can like
Yeah.
weld this, like this sphere that you're looking at right here is a sphere inside of a sphere. If you can weld that, then you can produce this and you can retrofit an engine. So even if it doesn't end up being cold fusion and Overunity, it's still amazing. And then the concepts of the plasmoids themselves might actually be able to be used in a different model or a different construct to actually produce like cold fusion and Overunity. So this is where like you watch some debunkers. I watched a debunker video yesterday. We're like, oh no, it's not actually producing excess energy. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, maybe this design doesn't, but even if it doesn't, this design still does really awesome stuff that should definitely not be ignored.
Yeah. This design allows you to run like 8,000 miles on a gallon of fuel.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's that efficient, but still any efficiency gain at all is big. I mean, we were talking early on about how fuel efficiency actually went down in the 90s as opposed to going
Yeah.
up.
We talked
And
about,
people like if you look at the history of fuel efficiency, even with electric cars and hybrids, and I have a hybrid car, it shouldn't we're not advancing nearly as fast as we should be compared to like how far we're advancing with like phones and stuff like that, which is like, it's like almost singularity levels at this point. So
yeah.
this is the stuff where it's like we're clearly being held back from what's possible that's out there. And cold fusion is really exciting. I think that the two things people really need to start to understand that the public doesn't really understand is plasma physics, which is, cold fusion, exotic vacuum objects, ball lightning. These are all kind of the same concepts. And then the other one is semiconductors and superconductivity, where electrons are just flowing freely without any resistance. Superconductivity is where we start to see some of these, what they call macroscopic quantum effects. So the quantum
that
effect
is the interchange of things between dimensions that we are not part of. So the quantum effect is when things are being affected in our 3 dimensions from other dimensions that we're so stupid for the last 150 years knew were there, and we still have not investigated why.
Yeah, like the double slit experiment. That's the double slit experiment.
That's from what, 1803? How long does that go back?
Well, people
250 years?
A while. And I think my favorite theory is the pilot wave theory. That was always one when I heard it, that was my favorite. And it was Bohm that came up with it. And Bohm has a theory that's the Ehrenhoff-Bohm effect, Ehrenhoff and Bohm. And that's this effect that where if you take like a solenoid, you can start to create these Schrodinger type concepts that we would see in terms of if your object is here or over there. And then with respect to the double slit experiment, it has to do with non-locality. The idea of, is your object here or is your object here? And this is where you start to wonder how time even works. If you can have non-locality where there's this reaction that's happening faster than time, it goes back to our earlier discussion about, well, is time even linear then? Or are we living in some type of construct that can like look a little bit ahead and look a little bit behind and then react accordingly? And that's a quantum effect. Now, if you can take that quantum effect and scale it up, like with those superconductors, macroscopic quantum effect. Now, what is that? That's teleportation that we're talking about. Am I over here or am I over here?
Well, because the quantum effect depends on the observer.
Yes, exactly.
So if I go in and I expect a result, I may get it, but someone else may get a different result.
Because we're all in different frames of reference. This is something that Einstein taught us. And this is where I would say, like, even if the plasma theory of the universe or electric theories of the universe are correct, even if there's an ether, this doesn't mean that we throw out everything that Einstein did. No. I mean, Tesla can be right and Einstein can be right. And they might not both be right about everything. But Einstein would have said that there's a frame of reference, and this is how time dilation can be real. And then there's a correction mechanism. The correction mechanism is time dilation, where it's like you can look like you're going super speed to me, but you're just moving at normal speed because your frame of reference, you're just experiencing life normally. But for me, it looks like you're going super fast. And then my frame of reference is completely different than yours. And this can also explain, like, did people ever wonder why it looks like an ant moves super fast, even though it's really tiny, or like how a dragonfly's wings can bat as fast as they do, or a fly, how it can move around so fast? Well, that might be because they have their own frames of reference. And so they're experiencing a time dilation effect that we don't perceive because we're very large and they're very small. And so it could be that a fly
lives for like 24 to 36 hours.
And because their time is moving faster, right?
Their wings have to move 1 million flaps a second.
But from the perspective of if you were the fly,
could you imagine you were the fly? You're probably living like this, like
exactly. Or are you looking around and you're looking at us?
This world is amazing.
And that's actually true, right?
20 years, but it's only 36 hours for us.
It would be a situation more where like they are moving normally from there from a reference, but they look at us trying to swat them with this fly swatter. It would look like we're going super slow motion. Yeah, exactly. Right. And this is where that's what people should think of. That's real. Time dilation is real. And that's what, if you start to think about things in that perspective.
Look, insects,
understand.
They're living in such a short time frame. They can see electromagnetic frequencies coming out of the flower petals. That's how they know how to feed. So they can see in different dimensions that we can. So that may have to do with the dilation. What if you dilate the time you exist biologically in our time frame, you get to experience more in a shorter period, like a dog. My partner always is like, oh, it's so sad. Dogs only live 10, 20 years. And like, well, I'm like, no, but like every day is a year to a dog. They get to wake up, they go out, they run around, they go to the river, they go to the lake. We don't even do that shit every day. Like, we don't do any of that.
Yeah, and I think everybody should be kind to animals. I'm a big animal lover
Yeah.
in general. I think that we should respect the sanctity of life everywhere that's out there. And even if what we're talking about here is true, related to all this science, I think that the conclusion would be that we live in a holographic principle. People will call it a simulation, but even if that's true, I don't think it diminishes life. I would not give anything up I would want to still live in this as long as I've got on this planet, because I just think that life is beautiful. But then you go back to this science, and there's this very dark history to it in terms of, wow, how long have we been hiding this? How have we been hiding this? And why haven't we revealed it? And I think the answers there are I think that we've gotten to a point now where some people want it out, but it's been hidden for so long, nobody knows even how to get it out because there's so much legal liability for revealing it. And then there's also this issue of this technology, when you start to think about it, if you're somebody out there who's a creative thinker, you're going to be going, I bet we could make doomsday weapons out of this. And the answer is absolutely. I think that we could create a black hole with this type of gravitational technology. I think we might even be able to create a big bang with this type of technology. And you start to think about that and you go, whoa, I don't know. Do we really want this out there? Like just today they were talking about,
8
Russia's got
billion stupid people. Come on.
yes. And just today we're talking about, Russia's putting nuclear weapons or something in Cuba again. I'm just sitting here laughing, going, guys, if people knew what kind of weapons we have now, they would be way, way more scared, because nuclear weapons are nothing compared to the types of weapons we can theoretically create. And I would be afraid if like a rogue faction, like another ISIS, were to come around and they were to have access to this technology. I'd be afraid that they would suicide bomb, blow up the whole planet. And that could be a very valid and noble reason for why people would hide it. But at the same time, I think that humanity deserves it because I think that our fate is our own. No matter what we do, if we destroy ourselves, that's up to us to decide. But also, I think that people are inherently good and that we can move to
Yeah.
Star Trek world before we destroy ourselves. And then lastly, I would say that one thing I've learned is one of the applications of a high frequency gravitational waves is that we can produce a detector that can detect them as well. In fact, I'm starting to think that maybe one of those Antarctica detectors might secretly be a high frequency gravitational wave detector, and that it can potentially detect anybody who's producing gravitational waves, even on the surface of the Earth. And so that if somebody was messing around trying to make a dirty bomb of, some type of electromagnetic super bomb, we might be able to detect it before they even produce it, and then go and shut them down. So these are the reasons why I still feel comfortable doing it. But I do start to feel a little bit weird when I'm disclosing some of this, because I do think it's absolutely real. And I don't want to endanger the planet. And I also don't want to betray my country and, give away our secret technology to our adversaries. So
I don't think we're the only ones that have this secret technology.
no,
I think it's globally shared. I think there's
I
a
agree.
secret cabal that knows about it, keeping it hidden. And I don't think it matters if it gets into the wrong hands, even if they create a destructive thing that creates an implosion that removes the Milky Way. Our souls and our energy are infinite in the universe, and we'll be somewhere else in another solar system immediately when we need to go there. So
Sure.
this whole idea of fear porn, and the fear propagated to suppress this information is propagated by the powers that be that know about this information.
Yeah.
They themselves know that they're at risk of all the things that we are at risk of.
Yeah.
They're not hidden. I mean, they can go underground into their deep underground military base. Maybe they have a cloaking device. But the fact is that, well, I think that you're right. It's a simulation. It doesn't matter. We've been here before. I feel like I've been here a million times before. I've done this all before with you, Ashton, and we're going to do it all again, even if they create a singularity that sucks us all in tonight and we're all eliminated. This
Time is a
is
flat
not,
circle.
yeah, it's not for nigh, because the older I get, and you're a young buck, you got a couple of years to follow me, is that no matter how many bad things I've done or what has happened in my past, every single day forward is a day to better myself, to help others, to make the world a better place, no matter what's going on. While I see people running around all around me, chickens with their heads cut off, and they're reading the newspapers, watching the news, I just plant more seeds, plant more trees, walk in nature a little bit more, and maybe dive into some of these topics to stimulate my brain activity and dive a little deeper. But at no point am I upset about the impending World War III, because people, if they just simply researched history, it's only like a few percent of the population in any war is affected. Everyone else is just fear porned. Everything changes. Time always changes. Everything is different in the future. Imagine how stupid we looked in 1983. You might have just been born then. The girl's hair and the socks and the stupid pants we had on. That was a time to be alive, by the way.
Yeah, I think that I'm not afraid of nuclear Armageddon. I think we've got technology that renders that type of technology completely moot. And like you were saying before, I think the United States, at least right now, is military supremacy of the planet. I don't think we have anything to be afraid of. But I do think that China is catching up rapidly. And I think that Russia is lagging behind a little bit since the fall of the Soviet Union. But if you look as well, just remember semiconductors and plasma physics. Look at the stock prices of semiconductors over the last few years. Just look at NVIDIA and look at how we've been putting tariffs.
NVIDIA is up 9,700% and just split by 1 to 1,000?
1 to 10, but yes.
Oh, I thought it was 1,000.
1 to 10 is a huge split.
That's huge.
And it went from a price of 1,000 to a price of 100. And yeah, everybody who had 1 share now gets 10 shares. And I think we just put tariffs on China's semiconductors, and China just, I think, announced a $160 billion injection into their semiconductor industry. This is because semiconductors are like the secret to all advanced super technology, and the public basically has no idea. But the governments of the world know, and there's this war and race for this technology going on behind the scenes right now, which is kind of incredible to think about.
Yeah, because if you don't know, and I'm going to break it down for the layman, if we have this type of room temperature superconductor, that means no friction. If you have no friction, you need no fuel.
Nothing heats up.
You just need to push forward. So
imagine how much power loss is just due to heat. I think I read it was
we could go back to Fred Flintstone. You just put your leg out and you go forward and you accelerate continuously forever.
And here's another interesting thought for people that are out there. This is something that I just kind of had an epiphany on just the other day, was that we might not even need metamaterials for room temperature, high temperature superconductivity. So AC current basically flows back and forth. The electrons don't flow very quickly. So what creates the power, it gets a little bit confusing. Power doesn't actually flow through wires. It flows through fields that the electrons in the wires create. And if we were to have AC power move extremely rapidly, I think I would postulate, what if that extreme rapid movement can cause high temperature superconductivity? It can induce it. Like if you were to be able to get speeds that are super high with that AC.
Let's jump back, and I think we'll blow people's minds. Those high power tension lines are not moving power from the power plant into your house. That's not happening. It's a lie. It's a fraud. There's an electron in that cable that just moves back and forth and propagates the wave forward. So the actual electricity is in the same spot the whole time. It's not coming into your house from the power plant. The power plant excites the vibration, which moves through the cable, which is, by the way, leaking out of the sheath and leaking out of everywhere. It's dumping out everywhere where we can collect it.
That's why we have insulators.
Unity devices, because it's adding extra energy.
If people didn't know that too, this is why we put our power lines above ground, is that because the ground itself is a semiconductor. That's why we don't put it in the ground, because otherwise the electricity would seep into the ground, into the earth. So this is why we hold it in the air, because the air acts as a insulator. And so it keeps the power in there. And then the power actually use the right hand rule. So the electrons form magnetic fields that are rings around the wires. And then you have the electric field as well. And then you can use the right hand rule, and you can determine the vector of travel of the power. And this is where if you were to create a circuit and you were to have like a battery, let's say right here, and you were to have a light bulb right here next to it, but you have this circuit that kind of goes all the way around back through that wall and comes back, the power actually propagates directly from the battery to the light bulb, like through this medium right here, even though there's no wire there. And this is where people learn, even though it's hard for people to understand, that power doesn't flow through the wires. It's actually flowing through fields, basically directly through space. And it's the wires that just determine the vector of the power flow.
Which is how the power companies can scam you out of the money every month.
Yeah.
It's
And
a
then, but this
scam.
idea is like, if power is flowing through empty space or space time, then it makes you wonder, where's the power really coming from? And then if you start to realize that, oh, well, the power is coming from this space-time ether that we have, and let's say the battery and the wires are just conduits for that, then you can understand, well, do we even need wires? And, can we just extract energy directly from this ether? And, I would say look at electromagnetism, because that's the basis for the wires in general. So, I'm not going to give any more away, but this is, I think, one way for sure that we can produce and achieve Overunity. The other one that I think is really interesting is the Casimir force that I talked about before, which is the idea you put two plates close together, and then all of a sudden a negative pressure zone happens where they attract. Well, where's that force coming from? Where's that power coming from? It's got to be coming from somewhere. And the physicists would say, well, it's coming from the virtual particles. I had somebody on my stream say this. I said, what the hell's a virtual particle? Where's that coming from?
The
And so you ask
ether.
these questions. Exactly, the ether. For you, it's obvious. But then for the physicists, they just get quiet because they're like, because they're really just making up terms to get around the ether. It's just the ether with extra steps. So that's my favorite thing to say right now.
Well, this is the same problem with cosmology. If you
It is.
Google plasma scaling, it says that plasmas can act in every scale, all the way down to the subatomic, all the way up to the galactic. And so when you're pressing two magnetic plates and you're creating an electric field, it's not coming from the plates, it's coming from the field.
Correct.
And the same thing, like this is why cosmologists don't understand what's happening, because they think a star has some kind of an internal combustion engine in the middle burning, when it's just picking up the field from the outside and glowing. No wonder it's 30 million degrees in the atmosphere of the star, and it's only 9,000 Kelvin on the surface. And they're baffled on how the millions of degrees get from the center to the surface to the atmosphere. Well, thermodynamically, it's impossible. Yet for 130 years, we've stuck with this model, and they still believe the sun is an internal combustion engine pushing 90 million degrees out from the center to a cold surface and then to the atmosphere. It's like, this is like a third. If I explained it to a third grader, he would look at me like I was an idiot.
So wouldn't it just explode? It's like, no, it's up there for billions of years. Well, how? Yeah. So no, I totally agree with you on that front. And I guess what I would say too is there's a couple other concepts. So one of them is like the idea of quartz and the pyramids, this idea that piezoelectricity. If you squeeze quartz, it produces electricity. Salvatore Paez, who I did a couple of interviews with, he's the one that got me this idea of vibration potentially being able to achieve superconductivity. Well, what if you change the medium, the crystal lattice structure? Because that's what squeezing the quartz is, right? You're manipulating the lattice structure of the crystal itself. Maybe you can achieve superconductivity that way as well. Maybe you can suck power out of something. I mean, that's literally, we just take a rock, quartz, and you squeeze it. This is how the watches work, where you're shaking it. It's using piezoelectricity to produce that.
So you go carbon,
maybe there's a way we can
graphite, diamond,
boom. Yep. And so maybe there's a way where we can squeeze energy out of things like that.
So
maybe
after diamond, it's like telepathic.
Maybe, but that's the thing. It's like, maybe we can achieve superconductivity from squeezing
we can certainly achieve superconductivity or levitation, at least, from vibration. So and there's tons of YouTube videos,
and we can do another video on cymatics and definitely sound that can produce.
I would love to do that.
Yeah, we might have to do another one on that.
Let's dive into cymatics and let's talk about that, and let's teach everyone how shit can flow.
Yeah.
Oh, this has been a great show. I don't think we got to go any deeper. We've covered so many topics so rapidly, people's heads have already exploded. So if they want to get on your list, which will probably they won't make it through, but how do they do that?
Yeah. So if you are somebody, maybe if you're somebody who's been looking at solar panels and you've got some money that you're trying to throw down and you want to see what the alternatives are, check out aethertech, aethertechLLC at gmail.com. There's a list, but basically give me your contact information, why you want the device, how much power you're trying to produce. I'll get back in touch. We can see if it is going to be a good match or not. Otherwise, stay tuned to see how this plays out. And if it gets suppressed, or if it doesn't get suppressed and turns into a big business, then I hope to be able to get this product out there to the whole world, honestly. And
Sounds
follow
awesome.
along. Yeah, and follow along at JustXAshton on Twitter and also on my YouTube channel. I've still been going through mostly science now, although there is still a little bit of MH370 stuff. My favorite is to dig into the science, find a huge breakthrough, and then go pull the videos back up and go, holy shit, like this is why the harmonic pattern with the orbs, like this is why they're converging the way they're converging, all this stuff. That's why you're probably never going to see me change my banner. What you can see there is the plane.
142.6K.
Yeah, I mean it's wild, right? And so there's a lot of people too, a lot of haters, but that's fine. I don't even mind.
No,
you know, because you know you've made it when you've got a bunch of haters that are out there.
oh my God, I have more people
wild.
blocked than more people subscribe.
But yeah, there's a lot. We have probably I think one of the greatest communities out there, because I've got people from both political spectrums, people that have scientific background, people that are just like brand new and fresh into it, people that are conspiracy theory people that are UFO people. It's just an awesome mix. And so we have really great streams. And you know, I've got also, it's kind of funny that my last name is Forbes, and you can see it. We've got the 4 orbs sign right here, which it just happens to match because we think there's a 4th orb that's not seen in the videos that's causing the teleportation.
Plus Forbes is an investing firm, and people think I'm related to Oppenheimer Investments or something, and I'm not even related to Oppenheimer's.
And I'm not related to Forbes magazine, but you know, it's nice to take advantage of the name, right?
All right, please go over there and follow Ashton Forbes on his X. We're going to leave you links to that. We're going to leave you links to his Facebook page. He's almost at 30K. We're going to get there tonight. Ashton, anything else you want to shout out? We're going to leave you links below to how to contact Ashton for the Overunity. He's going to give us all that info. So just check the description box now.
No, I would just shout you out, Diamond. I appreciate all our conversations. Everybody should be following Diamond, Oppenheimer Ranch on Twitter and on YouTube. I've been following your content for many months now, since I first met you. And I like all the stuff that you post. You also have a really good mix of science and weather-related stuff that I find really interesting. So keep up the good work, man.
And I can be serious and funny.
Yeah, it's good.
We appreciate you. We love you, Ashton. Be safe.
Take it easy. Peace.
Boom.